The following is a summary of a Sicha of Shabbos Parshas Boy Tov Shin Nun. Vayhi bi'arboim shona ba'ashtei osar chodesh ba'asiri lachodesh. That year, Yud Shvat Tov Shin Nun was exactly 40 years of the Histalkus, of the passing of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, on the day of the Hilula, Kol Masov v'toirosei v'avedosei asher ovad bo kol yimei chayov, all their deeds, Torah and Avodah, which the tzaddik has engaged in their entire life, Poyel Yeshua's Bekerev Haaretz, has a tremendous effect within this physical world. And especially there is, after 40 years, an indication in the Pasuk in Parshas Kisovei, which says, Nosan Hashem lochem leiv lodas ve'einayim lirois ve'oznaim lishmoya. Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Yidden that after 40 years in the wilderness, they've reached a level of an understanding heart, eyes to see, and ears to hear. And as the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah Daf Hey Amud Beis, be'arboin shnin, after 40 years, Koi inish adaita de Rabbi. A person attains the mind and the understanding of their teacher. And Rashi explains that they're able to know soif datoi utfu nosoi, what really their inner and essential intention was. And therefore we can understand from this that at the end of 40 years of the Avodah of the Frierdiker Rebbe, we are now at a moment where we can have an understanding heart, eyes to see and ears to hear, in a completely new way what his Torah was about and his directives. And this, the idea of culminating 40 years of Avodah and having a new perception and understanding, as it was then when the Yidden had been 40 years in the desert, that brought about a completely new and fundamental beginning in the Avodas Hashem. Because Yetzias Mitzrayim and Matan Torah, the Exodus and the giving of the Torah, they are the Yesodus of Klal Yisrael. They're the foundations of the Jewish people. As it says, V'lokachti eschem li la'am, Hashem said, I've taken you for me as a people. V'hayisi lachem lelekim, and I'm going to be for you as your God. And that, of course, came in a most revealed way at Matan Torah, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed himself, but it culminated after the 40 years sojourn in the desert, when after all that time, the Jewish people finally reached Adaita de Rabbi, the full understanding of the Torah and its directive. As is understood from the Zohar says on the Pasuk, V'yadaitem ki ani Hashem Elokeichem, you should know that I am the Lord your God. Says the Zohar, that's Pekudah, that command is Kadma D'chol Pekudin, is the most fundamental and the first of all commandments. And that comes to full revelation at the end of 40 years. And the Zohar explains there that there is the Yediyah, the knowledge of Hashem, B'derech Klal, in a general way, which that was by the Exodus and in a revealed way at the time of the giving of the Torah. However, its full revelation in all its detail, that came about through the sojourn in the desert and culminated at the end of 40 years when they got this leiv lodas, as it says, the ability to internalize things and take things to heart. And therefore, this nosan lochem, Hashem giving us a leiv lodas, is a very important and fundamental culmination of Yetzias Mitzrayim and Matan Torah. And only after that were the Jewish people ready to enter into the land, build the Beis HaMikdash, and fully cause the indwelling of the Shekhinah in the Beis HaMikdash. So we can understand from all of the above that there is a tremendous lesson for all generations, that after 40 years of avodah of a Jew, that comes to a certain completion. And this, of course, extends itself to his students, and especially in our generation, where, according to all the signs that Chazal have given, we are in the last generation of Galus and the first generation of Geula, then certainly we've reached now a level of Adaita de Rabbi, of fully understanding the intent of the Rebbe, and we're prepared and ready to enter into Eretz Yisrael. And this is certainly the case when we're talking about a Nasi of Chabad, where in Chabad one reaches the shleimus, the completion of the idea of Da'as Elokei Avicha, of knowing Hashem, va'avdeu b'leiv hasholem, and serving Him with a perfect heart. So in order to understand this concept properly, what we're going to do is to have a look both in detail at the pasuk Nosan Hashem lochem levad aladas, and in detail in the Gemara, where the Gemara says Koi ina shadaita derabe. So let's start with the pasuk. The pasuk says Nosan Hashem lochem, Hashem gave you lev ladas, an understanding heart, Einayim lirois, eyes to see, v'oznaim lishmea, and ears to hear. First of all, why does it say Nosan Hashem Hashem? Hashem gave you. What's this idea of Hashem giving you? Second of all, why does it say Lochem? Hashem gave you. Third of all, what are the three aspects of Lev Ladas, an understanding heart, Einayim lirois, eyes to see, and oznaim lishma, and ears to hear? What do those three refer to? And fourth of all, what is the order in those? That first we have the Lev Ladas, second Einayim lirois, and third oznaim lishma. In the Maimah Chazal, Koi ina shadaita de Rabbi, the word Koi is an interesting word. It should have said a person is Yodea or Maven, knows or understands the mind of their teacher. What does the word Koi mean? In fact, it says in the pasuk Lev Ladas, so it really should have used also in the Maimah Chazal the idea of Yediyah, knowing. What does Koi mean? Also, why does it use the word Inish? We know there are 4 words for a man: Adam, Gever, Ish, and Enosh. The word Enosh is the lowliest state of man. Why does it use the word Inish if we've reached the culmination of understanding? Surely we should use an expression of man which is the Mila, the advantage of man, not the least and weakest point of a man. Also, it should have used the word Talmid, Talmid meaning a student. The Talmid reaches the understanding of their teacher. Why all these changes? So, first of all, we can say that in this pasuk, there is a general directive in our Avodas Hashem. And since in our Avodas Hashem, there needs to be achieved 2 things. Number 1, we have to have a yichud with Hashem. We have to become one with Hashem through learning Torah and mitzvahs. And secondly, there needs to be a gilui elokus, a revelation of godliness down here in the world. Therefore, the pasuk is giving out a general directive in terms of Gilui Elokus Melamayla, revelation of godliness from above, and it's being received down here in this world. In fact, the Zohar explains that full knowledge of Hashem is when a person's understanding of Hashem is a detailed knowledge. And that's why it culminated over 40 years in the desert, because it matured and it grew and it was very detailed. In fact, the Mitzel Rebbe explains the same is true of hisbonenus of meditation. It's not enough to have hisbonenus klolis, general meditation, but a person should also have hisbonenus pratis, detailed meditation. And there is an advantage in the klal, in the general meditation, which there isn't in the detail, but there's an advantage in the detail which there isn't in the general principle. What is the advantage of the general meditation? The idea is that when a person meditates generally, then they come to the very essence of the light in general. However, it could be that if a person doesn't delve into the detail, it remains somewhat removed from the person. It remains somewhat aloof or rachik, distant from the person. It's not internalized. Whereas when a person meditates in detail, they integrate the general principle in all the details. However, if only one dwells on the details, one can sometimes veer off and miss the general principle, which is why there actually have to be both of them together. And consequently, these two levels of meditation actually concur with the two ideas which were spoken about beforehand. Hisboinenus klolis, general meditation, is gilui elokus melamayla, a revelation of godliness from above. And hisboinenus pratis, and detailed meditation, that's the clothing of the concept within the parameters of the human mind. And that is what happened at the end of the 40 years, that you had a yichud of Havaya and Elokim. Havaya is the klal, and Elokim is the prat. Elokim is the idea of teva, halbosha, clothing the concept within the mind. And now we'll be able to understand all the details in the pasuk. The pasuk starts off by saying, Nosan Hashem. This, first of all, was a gilui melamayla. There's a revelation of above, the Shem Havaya. But Nosan Hashem lochem, it was given to you. It was given that you should be the owners of this wisdom. And it should be given lifneichem, lipnimiuschem, so that you fully integrate it. And therefore, it was Nosan Hashem, but lochem. And the idea is that it should completely permeate you in every single one of your koiches, starting off with the three minds, the three brains of Chabad, Chochmah, Bin, and Das. And hence, first of all, we have Lirois, Einayim Lirois, which the idea of Re'iyah, seeing, is the Moyach HaChochmah, the brain of Chochmah. And then you have Oznayim Lishmaya, ears to hear, which the idea of hearing is connected with the Moyach of Bina, of understanding. And then you have Leiv Lodas, and from the Moichin, from the mind, and especially from the faculty of Das, which splits into Chesed and Gvura, Ahava and Yira, the Midos, which then spills over into Machshava Dibra Maisa, thought, speech, and action. And that is what's hinted to in the Maimar Chazal, Koi ina Shadaita de Rabbi. The word Koi means a new shtel, a metzias chodosh legamre, something, a completely new being, as if you've been put on your feet from anew. And therefore, it can even affect an inish. Even the weakest of person is completely transformed by this new depth of understanding. And it's a daita de Rabbi. A person attains the das, the understanding of Rabbi, meaning of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as it's given over through the das Torah of the Rav. And that causes a tremendous yichud nifla of the Yid with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. To put it in an expression of halacha, a Jew is mechuyev, is obligated in the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem, not only in the idea of elokus, of godliness, which has a connection with the creation, but also with elokus, which transcends creation. As the Rambam says, the Yesod HaYesodas v'Amud HaChochmas is Leida Sheyesh Motzui Rishon, and ultimately to come to the idea Shehu Amada v'Hu HaYodea, as it will be Lasid Lave, the Kala Asik, the Asik of Kala Olam Kulo will be Lo Das Es Hashem Bilvad, Umala Ha'aretz De'es Hashem. This point is actually difficult to understand, because the Rambam says that the Amitis HaBoire, the truth of Hashem, Ein Daita Shalodam Mavin, a person can never actually fully attain it. In fact, the Rambam uses the expression Ein koach bepeh le'omre. It's not within the power of the mouth to articulate it. And when we're learning Maaseh Merkava, the works of the Merkava, it says Ein kol das v'das ro'eh l'soigla. Not every mind can attain it. And that being the case, how can anybody ever achieve a daite de Rabbi, the das, if you want, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? That itself is a question in the Rambam itself. The Rambam himself says that one can't attain it, and yet at the same time says it's a mitzvah to know it. And the answer is that through the faculty of emunah in Hashem, a Yid can come to know those things and appreciate those things that even transcend intellect. Or in philosophical language, the ultimate of knowledge is to know that you can't know. The explanation is that the ultimate of emunah is that when that permeates the entire being of a person, their mind, their entire mitzias, when a person says, Moida ani lefanecha, shehachzarta bi nishmasi, they feel their entire being through that emunah permeating a person's entire being. Koi adaita de Rabbi, it's possible to reach a level of das which even transcends intellect. And therefore, after the giving of the Torah, at the beginning of the 40 years in the desert, learning Torah was on a level of elikus which had a connection with the Bria. However, after the 40 years, they were able to have an aliyah, they were able to elevate to daita de Rabbi, to understand fully what Hashem wanted, and that's the leiv lodas, and that comes through nosan Hashem, through Hashem giving it. And that's why in the pasuk, leiv lodas comes before Einaim lirois and oznaim lishmeya, because in the Seder of Chochma, Bina, and Das, Chochma and Bina comes before Das. So it should really have said Einaim lirois, oznaim lishmeya, and then Leiv lodas, but it doesn't say that. First of all, it says Leiv lodas, and then it says Einaim lirois, and then oznaim lishmeya. And the answer is because the type of Das that we're talking about here is a Das that's achieved through Nosan Hashem Lochem, Leiv lodas, the idea of Emunah, which permeates a person's being so that they actually infuse Chochma and Bina itself. This is the idea in Chassidus of Sevev Kol Almin, which is higher than the Hasaga of the Nivra, and yet it connects Emunah with Chochma and Bina. To put it in a slightly different way, we have the idea of a klal, a prat, and a klal. A general principle, a detail, and a general principle. The klal, the general principle, was Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. The detail was the 40 years in the desert. And then it culminated in the klal, the final principle of 40 years of being in the desert when they reached the full das es Hashem. And it needs to be in such a Seder. Because first you need the general principle, you then need to fully integrate that general principle within all the details, and only then do you actually come to a much more deeper and maturer understanding of the original general principle. And that's how it is every single day. First of all, we start by Moida Ani Lefanecha, which is a general. Then we go and detail it through all the blessings. And then we come at the end of davening to the full principle, Yesh v'Yusharim es Panecha, the idea of Pnimius and Atzmus. So now we understand that when after 40 years, a daita de Rabbi, a person comes to a full matured understanding of their Rebbe, and they become koi, a metzius chadosha, a completely new metzius, when they learn the Torah of the Rebbe, which the Torah of the Rebbe is Anon Nafshi Kasavis Yehovis. The Rebbe puts his entire being into the Torah. And certainly in the last generation of Golus, where it says that after all the time in Golus, all the Nitzutzi Kedusha have been elevated. And in fact, there were generations where there were great tzaddikim who could have pushed the end of Golus, but they desisted in doing so because all the details of the Nitzutze Kedusha that needed the elevating had not yet been done. But now where we're holding at the end of Golus and all the detail has been gone through and elevated, so now we can come to the, if you want, the end of the 40 years sojourn in the desert, we can come to the full culmination. And that's connected with the Parsha of Boy, which is the Geula, the Yetzias B'nai Yisrael from Mitzrayim, and that's done by Tzivus Hashem, by the army of Hashem, the idea of being completely bottled. Even a soldier who is sleeping, is quite recognizable that they have the Kabbalah soul of a soldier. And as it says that the pshitas of an ish pashut, the simplicity of a simple person, in fact reaches and is able to grasp the simplicity of Atzmos. And it's to this generation that the king gives out all the storehouses, and he comes himself and redeems them. And just like it was then, after 40 years, that they entered into the land, so too it should be in our days, that now that we've reached the culmination of this 40 years, we should immediately enter into the land with the Geula. And this is the answer to many people who ask, what now is the Avodah after the 40 years of Tafshin Yud to Tafshin Nun as it was in that year? And the answer is that we need to become a completely new Metzias, a completely new being, a completely new Yesoid Adaita de Rabbi. Simply meaning, that means to do all the work that the Rebbe wants us to do with a completely anayafarnem, a completely new lease of energy, with hasagas chadoshes, with new goals and aspirations, but they should be hasagas of the Rebbe, according to what the Rebbe's aspirations are, not according to ours. And therefore, each person has to establish a completely new institution, and that institution, that new Moised, has to be Adaita de Rabbi, as the name of the Friedrich Rebbe was Yosef, which Yosef is the Midah of Yesoid, and it says Sadik Yesoid Olam, he is the foundation of the world, and Chayav Adam Loima B'Shvili Nivra Olam, each person must say, for me the world was created, and that world needs the foundation, needs a new Moised. And even in the place where there are already Moisdes, we should make new Moisdes. And that all comes with the Berchasa Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu and all the expenses which are needed for it, especially in this case where the Rebbe was giving a hishtatvus, a monetary taking part monetarily in the number of 40. And since everything starts with Torah, it should start with a new Moised of giving out Chidushay Torah, Kovtzim of Chidushay Torah, and especially in the Torah of the Rebbe, and especially on Yud Shvat, one should also give extra tzedakah in the number of 40. And through all these efforts, Hekitzu Verananu Sheichne Ofar, this should all cause the resurrection of those who repose in the dust, and the Rebbe Bereshenu taking us to the Geula, Tekef Umiyad Mamash.